In this series, we address frequent topics that most managers and business leaders struggle with. We offer new perspectives and tips to help you test alternative behaviors or identify more productive paths to tackle your challenges.
Hello, welcome to Conversations with Grooa. Today we are talking about listening and specifically on how listening can influence your leadership. I'm Elena Di Girolamo and I will be interviewing Laura Lozza.
Hello.
So Laura, as always, I have here a question of one of our listeners. It is Sven who writes us, I am confused. During my performance review, my boss told me that he's concerned about my leadership skills because I do not listen. I told him I've always considered myself to be a charismatic leader. People do listen to me and always seem to convince them with my enthusiasm and my logic. But my boss said that the results contradict my assumptions. People might listen to me and initially agree, but then they do not entirely follow up on the agreement. I try to argue that people simply need to be frequently reminded. They need to continue to push them. That is my job. But my boss just smiled and told me to reflect over a quote. You have not converted a man because you have silenced him. I'm not sure I understand what he means, Sven tells us. I'm not trying to silence anyone. I just try to motivate and convince. What should I answer to my boss? I hate to come across as defensive, but he does not understand my style and I want to explain it to him. What are your suggestions, Laura, for Sven?
Yeah, it is an intriguing question, Elena. You're right, because there is certainly a lot of merit and value in being able to share a well-structured and thoroughly evaluated proposal, especially if one is able, like Sven, to craft an engaging story around it, presenting it with enthusiasm. Certainly Sven is right in being proud of his verbal delivery skills. However, it just sounds, that like Sven might be experiencing a case of overused skills, too much telling, and not enough engaging or interacting, which obviously includes listening. That is probably what the comment by his boss was about. It sounds like people might be mesmerized in the moment. They might buy in to Sven's ideas on impulse, but then they go away and they might think again about what they have heard, and they try to get their heads into what was agreed, and then they might find out that they still have some doubts or concerns which they had no time to voice or even to formulate in their heads while Sven was talking so convincingly. Some people might even feel commandeered rather than being invited to join in as partners, and so they may not put all their enthusiasm in the follow-up. So the first thing that I would suggest for Sven is actually to try and shift perspective with a simple exercise. Since Sven appears to have a contagious enthusiasm, maybe he can think of some occasions in his private life when someone else was contagiously enthusiastic and convinced him. Sven might remember, a time when he has been charmed by a charismatic salesperson or attracted by a great marketing presentation and bought a product on impulse, only to discover afterwards that his choice was not the best fit for his case. And maybe, just maybe, if he had just been able to interact, to ask some questions, if he had been given the opportunity to raise some doubts, and if he had been listened to by whoever was selling to him, maybe he could have found out the same product that he bought and was not a fit. Maybe it was also available in other shapes, in other colors, in other flavors, in other sizes. Maybe he would be able to find a better fit for his needs. But he never was given the opportunity. I'm sure that this happens to everybody. I know that it has happened to me at times, that I bought something convinced, and then I don't go back and try to change the size or the fit. I just give up that product altogether. I lose enthusiasm when I'm just feeling like I'm being coerced or convinced or manipulated. So this might be an interesting exercise for Sven. He could just put himself into other people's shoes, remembering his example of being, convinced and mesmerized and acting on impulse, only to regret afterwards that he didn't have a conversation.
Yes, I understand. And what about giving Sven some advice on how to talk with his boss about this situation?
Well, if Sven, as I think he will, does find the exercise useful, if he does realize that maybe his charismatic approach, seen from the other people's perspective, can be a little bit too pushy, maybe he will discover something, and then he will probably understand a little bit more what the boss means. And yes, of course, it is true that if he wants to go back to the boss and explain, that sounds like a justification. It sounds like being defensive. What he can do is just be himself and say, boss, the next conversation, hey, I was very puzzled at the time when you gave me that comment. I thought about it. I didn't quite understand it, and then I remembered a moment when I was listening to someone charismatic, and then maybe I didn't have a chance, or I wasn't invited to participate, and I was disappointed. And that when I remembered that, I understood your comment, and so thanks for telling me. I will try to remember that. That's all. It's a moment of sharing. It doesn't need to be an explanation or a justification. It can just be a simple sharing, because probably Sven will find out that there is something interesting to learn in there to adjust and balance his leadership.
Yes, indeed. This sounds like a very interesting suggestion, Laura, for Sven to put himself in other people's shoes, and also asking questions and opening the dialogue might still also help. Yes, Laura, this sounds like a very interesting suggestion for Sven to put himself in other people's shoes. Of course, asking questions is very important, but it will not help fully Sven if he doesn't practice what we call active listening. Because what can happen is he still could ask questions just to prove and go to his own point. So what really Sven needs to do is a shift on the attention to what other people have to say and what that means for him and for the topic is discussing at the moment. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we had a training with young managers, and we spent really a lot of time on listening skills, because they seem to be not well developed and not getting as much as the attention they really need. A little bit not taken care of in our standard educational system. So that's why for Sven is also not so spontaneous and so automatic, but still a very important point of attention for him.
Absolutely, you're touching on such an important point. The listening skills are not really taught very often as part of communication courses. You will learn how to speak, to tell, to present, to visualize, how to deliver things from me to you. And then we forget that we need to practice how to invite others and to ask questions that are not meant to just find what issues they have with my idea, but also to understand what they really need, what their needs are. The example of the salesperson for Sven could be, remember one time when someone wasn't trying to just sell you the product because that is what they had in mind, but maybe they had a conversation with you. What are you looking for? What are you interested in? What are your issues with what you have now? And then they could offer something that you could discuss in a different way rather than just pushing one idea. That is the type of attitude. Of course, Sven is interested in sharing his solution, his views, his ideas, but that doesn't mean that he's only going to be pushing, because he might have the opposite effect. People might not really feel that what they hear is theirs. So as we said, then he needs to shift perspective also in the way he's listening. And active listening means not just asking what you want and then being passively listening or hearing. It means really developing the curiosity muscle. It means to ask questions, not closed questions like, do you agree with me or not? And if not, why? What's the problem? Challenging people, trying to dismantle their opinions. The idea is to learn to ask questions like, how does this sound to you? Can you imagine this option that I'm offering to you in reality? What would be the hurdles for you? How would you tackle it? Get people to answer with more than just a yes or no. Asking open questions, interacting, and not saying, why don't you like my idea? But what, I see you're concerned. What do you see that I don't see? It's obviously my idea. I've developed it. I like it. I'm very enthusiastic. You can tell. And you come from a different perspective. Help me to see how it looks like from your side, with genuine curiosity. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's something that we need to put attention on if we really want to develop a very inclusive and productive leadership, where people will not just listen to the boss and do less than what is needed, but people will be really engaged and be productive.
Indeed, Laura, as you said, very often it comes back to practice. Just practice and find role models, observe other people, be curious, because listening goes hand in hand with curiosity, and curiosity is like a muscle, we say very often. We need just to exercise it, and it will just perform better and better for our leadership purposes. It's also very important to learn from others, invite actively others to give us feedback on how we improve during our practice, and that will help us being more aware and noticing how listening can bring us to more and more positive results.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elena.
If you have a question or a topic of interest, please email laura@grooa.com. Thanks for listening.